This is Gemara and Succah Daf Mem. All the learning for this month, the month of Elul, has been generously sponsored. Zechan Ishmas, Esther Rezel Basar Meir. Their neshama should have an incredible aliyah for the learning of the entire Chabura. Of course, as Chashidach as well for Yisrael and Devar and Shemirim Basar Yisrael Gittel. We're hoping, davening, and learning that they should find their Shidach by Karev Mamish, as well as our Chayim Men Beving Chaim Yisrael Shem Simon Rezel Zarbas Genendel. Itabasim was Chaysei Yisrael Men Delay Shem Shalei Shem Azam Shem Shechan Shem Medina Dem Chan Rezel Michaim Sim Levarach was Tov Musa Adin Evich Min Zviv Meger Devar Michal Tun Zel Huva Rivka with the Shem Naftal Zibin Chlaster. We are on the top of Mem Omid Aleph. We're in the middle of discussing. There is a Shemitah discussion that began yesterday. A discussion with regard to what year is the esrog and the lulav part of, because we had a bit of an issue. Because the Mishnah said, seemingly, you can buy the lulav, you can't buy the esrog. And the Gemara was bothered by what's going on. Can you buy the lulav or esrog? Both of them should have Shemitah. So we gave a unique answer that they grew in the 6th year into the 7th year. And therefore, the lulav is not an issue because it goes when it grew on the 6th year, but the esrog goes when it was plucked, it was looked at on the 7th year. So yes, has Shemitah. Saying to the Gemara was bothered, but Rav Gamliel and Rav Eliezer both disagree with that statement. Answered the Gemara on the top of Mem and Aleph, and this is where we're going to pick up from. Says the Gemara, who Damar our Mishnah, which differentiated between the lulav and the esrog, is going like the following Tanya. The Tanya we learned in a Raisa, he said testimony from 5 Zikenim. Esrog Acher Lakita, Lemaiser, esrog goes by the Lakita for the Maiser. So what do we see? It goes by the Lakita, like we just suggested a moment ago. And therefore it says the Gemara, our Mishnah is going with Rabbi Yossi ben Avtumis, and it's not a problem. The esrog goes by the Lakita, the 7th year, therefore there's Kedusha. What does the lulav go by when it grew in the 6th year? And therefore what? That's why you can buy the lulav, you cannot buy the esrog, because the esrog has kedusha because it was picked in the 7th year, whereas the lulav does not because it grew in the 6th year. Asks the Gemara, Shavias, Man Dachar Shemei, what's going on over here? The price that said in Usha, Bein Lamaiser, Bein Lashavias. Who's talking about Shemitah? Answers Gemara, Chasuri Mechzva. This is what the Brisa meant to say. Esrog goes by the picking. Lemaiser. The emergence. L'shvias. They go both for the mice and the shvias. So therefore, who's our Mishnah going after the change of this Brisa? It's going by the Rabbanan and Usha. That Shemitah, then Esrog goes by when it was picked. Therefore, since the esrog is picked in the 7th year, it has kedusha. Since the lulav grew in the 6th year, it does not have kedusha. And that's why the Mishnah yesterday taught us that you buy the lulav, they throw in the esrog. So you cannot buy the esrog because the esrog is kedusha shvias, which we mentioned next year is going to be this issue, not issue, God forbid, but it'll be this halacha, this din, that we're not going to buy the esrogim that are going to be picked in the coming year, the year of Shemitah, and therefore we'll buy the lulav and esrog will come along with it. Says the Gemara, what do we see back on yesterday's daf? We said that we differentiated, like we just explained, lulav goes where it grows, esrog goes where it hit. Says the Gemara, Taima, what's the reason based on everything we just said? The lulav, because the lulav goes from the 6th year into the 7th year, therefore we said it has no kedusha because it came from the 6th year. Who hadishvies kadosh? But what would that imply? That if it grew in the 7th year, it would have shemitah. Ask the Gemara, Amai, why would it have kedusha? Why would it have sanctity? Eitzim ba'almuhu, it's just a piece of wood. Ve'eitzim ein b'misham kedusha shvies. Ask the Gemara, you missed the boat. You asked the question yesterday, why are you allowed to buy the lulav and not the esrog? You know what the answer is? Because a lulav is not a fruit. A lulav is a piece of wood. And a wood does not have kedushas shvias. How do I know that? Tanya, like we learned in a Brisa, or the Tanan Shinja Danya, if you have branches of cane, branches of grapevines, that you gather up from the field to store them, if you took them to eat them, then of course, then because they're food. So says the Gemara, what was your question? It's very simple why you can purchase a lulav. You know why? It's a piece of wood. Just like you buy a chair on Shemitah. There's no shaykhs. You only can buy things with Kedusha Shvias, which is items made for eating. Answers the Gemara, shiny awesome. In that brisa that you just brought as support, in the brisa that said that when you gather it for storage, there's no kedusha shiny awesome. The Torah says lachem, it should be for you lach latida lachem dumi lachila. It's for you similar to eating. Misha hana asay ubi uray shaveh. The enjoyment, the hana, ubi uray, and its destruction, its consumption is together. Yatu eitzim, these woods are different. Hana asam achar biuran. You get benefit after they're burnt because you're using them for baking, and that is the reason why it does not have kedusha. Whereas when it comes to the lulav, it's not true because the lulav, it comes simultaneously, says the Gemara. And the consumption comes at the enjoyment comes at the same time of the destroying of the consumption, and therefore it will have kedusha shemitah. Why? Explains Rashi. What is a lulav primarily used for? A lulav is primarily used for a broom, and therefore the moment you're sweeping, that's when you get the enjoyment. Just like eating, as you eat it, you get the enjoyment. So the sweeping is the consumption, not really, but the sweeping is the consumption. That is the same moment getting the hana. So says the Gemara, lulav will have kedusha shemitah. Asks the Gemara, 1 second. What about wood? That's used oily wood. That they burn, and the moment they burn, that's when you get the hana. Based off the oil, you can use it for a torch. You answered me that the previous price was discussing alikafanim alikanim, which are used for baking. That you first fire them up, the oven gets hot, and then you throw the bread in it. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Maybe it's a piece of wood. It's full of oil, but you light it on fire, and it's a torch, and therefore the hana is in the same moment. Amar Rava, answers Rava, Stam, Eitzim, what's a piece of wood for? Piece of wood is for baking. That's a stam piece of wood. A stam piece of wood, for baking, not for a torch. And that's why that price that said that it's considered to not to be at the same time, there is no kedusha shvita on it, is because the enjoyment comes afterwards. But sometimes when it comes at the same time, like if it would be a case of a torch, like our case of a lulav, there is kedusha shvita, and therefore says the Gemara, we have to go back to our previous teretz that has to be a lulav that grew in the 6th year into the 7th year, and that's why there's no kedusha. But if it properly grew in the 7th year, there would be kedusha for the simple reason that the enjoyment comes at the same time of the usage. Says the Gemara, 1 second. You just suggested that if I have a piece of wood, lamashcha, full of oil, and you light it, that it will have kedusha of shemitah. Says the Gemara, ve'etzim lahasaka tanahi. By the way, that what you just suggested, that firewood is kedusha of shemitah, because when you light it, you get enjoyment. Says the Gemara, that is actually a machlekes. The Tanya we learned in Abraisa, ein moisrim peirush shvius leila mishrav leila chvaisa. You cannot give shemitah fruit, neither to the mishra, to a soaking pool, not to a laundering pool. Rav Yossi Omer moisin you can give them. Explains the Gemara. What exactly is this machlekes giving the fruit over to the laundry guy? My time at the Tanakama that you're not allowed to give it over. Damar Kar, the Torah says, that what do you use shemitah produce for? Just for eating, not for soaking, and not for different detergents that they would make out of it. My time with Rav Yossi, why does Rav Yossi say you can give it to them? Even for soaking, even for laundry. Says the Gemara. First, we're going to figure out the game of ping pong between Tanakam and Rav Yossi, then we'll bring it back, proving that it's machlekes tanayim. Says the Gemara, 1 second, but Tanakam oksiv lachem. What does Tanakam do with lachem? The Rav Yossi said means a choter chechem. Ha'o lachem de milachila, similar to eating. Mishana also. Says the Tanakama, you need to have the enjoyment, eating, consumption, destroying at the same moment. When you make these detergents, you make this laundry pool. First you soak it, you get out whatever those extracts are that allow you to do the laundry. Then you destroy it. Then you get the benefit by using it for laundry. That is what the Tanakama holds. But what does Rav Yossi hold? Rav Yossi, for Rav Yossi Oksiv Lach, what does he do with that word? You can't use it for some sort of a plaster, some sort of remedy, medicinal application. Like we learned in the Rice, you tell me it's for eating and not for using it as some sort of ointment. Not for the laundromat. Says Rabbi Yossi. So says the Gemara. So what do you see? You see seemingly the machlekes Rabbi Yossi and Tanakama. Tanakama holds with this idea that the consumption has to come at the same time to permit it. And that is the reason why the Tanakama holds of the idea of the Hanas of Birui Shaveh. Like Achila, that is what is allowed, whereas seemingly Rabbi Yossi disagrees. But first the Gemara continues, 1 second. My Royce, where do you, Rabbi Yossi, get what you just said? Well, the Rabbi says that Kavusa, Lai says Malugma. You have the same, you have two choices. One, you have to include. One, you have to exclude. You have one limiting word and one including word. So you said that you're limiting one another. Where do you get that from? Says the Gemara, Mar Bani is let's include the laundry. Why? That's every person uses laundry. Says, I want to exclude the ointment. Not everyone uses them. So says the Gemara, what do we see at the end of the day? We see that whether you're allowed to use Shemitah produce, Rav Yossi is the one that learned that only item that's not for everyone, but something like laundry are less allowed to be used. Whereas the Tanakama held that no, it has to be something that's eating and consumption at the same time. So it says the Gemara, that which we said in the previous brisa, that's where we started this piece, that's what we said in the previous brisa, that Shemitah is only allowed to be used for la'achla, and something that the hana, the enjoyment, at the same time as the destroying, says the Gemara, that is not so simple. That is machlekes, Tanakama, and Rav Yossi. Tanakama agrees, Rav Yossi disagrees with that statement. Says the Gemara, okay, let's go a bit further into the discussion of Shemitah. Man Tana Lahad Tana Rabbanan. Who is the following Tana that says La'achlav Leilam Lugma, La'achlav Leila Zilaf? You can eat it and not use it for medicine. La'achlav Leila Zilaf, not for sprinkling. They would sprinkle different fruits and whatnot in order to give a good aroma in the house. La'achlav Tidav Leilas Menu Apiktoizin, not to make with it a throw up item in a medic in English, so that makes you throw up. Who's this Tana that says we learn out that by Shemitah can only be used for eating and not for plaster, not for medicine, not for making things smell good, not for throwing up? Come on. Rav Yossi, it's going like Rav Yossi. Why? The Rabbanan, the Rabbanan say there's another one on the list, not for Mishach Vaisa. So it must be that this Mishnah is going with Rav Yossi, and that is the end of this part of the deep delving into the halach of Shemitah, that we need to have the Hana and the Birui at the same moment. Comes along Rav Elazar, we're holding 6 lines on the top, and he said, where does this whole Shemitah thing come from? Back in yesterday's Mishnah that discussed you buy the lulav and they throw in the esrog. And we spoke about that if you pay for the esrog, what's going to be the problem? The problem is that the money that you gave has has kedusha, has sanctity on it, and we don't trust Amaretz, which is why we said that if you by any chance gave him more money than 3 basic meals, you have to machalel, you have to deconsecrate that money onto your own personal produce in your own house in order to make sure it is used in the appropriate manner. So now it says the Gemara, let's go a bit deeper into that. Halacha Amar Rav Elazar ein shvius mischaleles elo derech mekach. The only way that Shemitah can be deconsecrated, it only goes onto money if you do it by the way of a mekach, a way of a sale. There's no difference. So we have a machlekes over here to Rav Elazar and Rav Yechanan. What is the way to transfer the sanctity of the item? Either you could buy it with the item, or you could do it by designating it for something else. Says the first opinion, says Rav Elazar, the only way to get kedusha, sanctity on the money, is if you buy something with it, but not by merely verbally designating that there's kedusha on it. Whereas Rav Yechanan says no problem. Either you could buy it, or you could do derech chilul. You could deconsecrate it and say that the kedusha is going onto it. Says the Gemara, okay, nice machlekes. Where do the opinions get their din from? My time with Rav Elazar. Where does Rav Elazar say that the only way to get the kedusha shmita onto the money is by purchase? Where did that come from? The Chsev, says the Gemara, it says in the pasuk b'shnasei yovel azayis, and this year of yovel v'gaimer etc. v'samach nearby that pasuk. What does it say? Chisim karu mimkar. What does the Torah say when you should make a mimkar, a sale? So says Rav Elazar, put the two together. Derech mekach, derech chilul. Says Rav Elazar, from the juxtaposition the Torah taught about that B'shnas HaYovel, the 50th year, which is of course the year of Shemitah as well, and put next to it with purchasing, shows us that the only way to put Shemitah, Kedusha, onto something is via a purchase. What about Rav Yechanan? Rav Yechanan, my time out, Chsev, ki Yovel hi kadosh. Says Rav Yochanan, the pasuk says it's Yovel Kadosh. It should be holy. It should be holy. Ma kodesh bein derech mekach bein derech chilul. How do you make something holy however you want? Av shvius bein derech mekach bein derech chilul. And now, of course, what's going to happen? Let's go. The game of ping pong. How does Rav Yochanan do the Rav Lazar's pasuk? Rav Yochanan. Hi, v'chazim gar mimkar my avidlei. What does he do the Rav Lazar's pasuk? He knows it for a different halacha. The Tanya learns in a brayso from Rav Chanina. Ray, come and see. How difficult, how important and severe is even the dust of Shemitah, the slightest bit of getting involved in a Shemitah Isser. How severe is it? It says Rav Chanina. Adam noisim noisim b'kir shvius. A person that does business with the produce of Shemitah thinking he's going to make money. Then you know what's going to happen. He's going to have to sell all his property. He's going to have no money. Veskelev and his items. Shenamar, the Torah says, this year of Yovel Tashubu, each person goes back to his field. For some what does it say close by to that pasuk of everyone going back to that which they owned? And from here it says, Rav Yosi Baravin, which the Gemara now is explaining, which the Gemara is explaining what Rav Yochanan is going to hold, that from the fact that the Torah says, in conjunction the two psukim, and you sell it or you buy it from the hand of your friend, sees they were talking about movable items. So we see from here, it says that if someone is not nizar, someone is not careful with the kedusha of Shemitah, and he just buys and sells things without any qualms, he's going to end up being one that has to sell all his items, and that is what Rav Yochanan does with that pasuk, and he does not have it left for that which Rav Elazar does with the pasuk. Is to teach us that the only way to get kedusha of Shemitah on an item is via a sale. Says Mir, okay, now let's go to Rav Elazar. For Rav Elazar, hi, Rav Yochanan, what does he do with the pasuk of Rav Yochanan? He needs for the following price. Ki yovel hi kadosh. Says in the Torah, yovel it should be holy. What does it mean holy? Ma kadosh. Taifas says damav. It grabs hold, consecrates over onto the money. Av shvius. Taifas says tamel, that it transfers over to its payments. Says Rav Elazar, that is what he does with the psukim of Rav Yochanan. That anything you pay for Shemitah, it gets the same halacha of the Shemitah, the same restrictions from the produce themselves go on to the money. Rav Elazar learns it out from the pasuk of Rav Yochanan. Now says the Gemara in classical sense, Tani Kavasei Rav Eliezer, we have a raya to both Rav Eliezer, who says the only way to get the kedusha of Shemitah onto something is purchasing it, and another raya like Rav Yochanan, you could get the sanctity of Shemitah onto whether you purchase it or whether you do it. You just say it to transfer. Says the Gemara, let's bring these rayas. The first right only goes by purchasing. Says in the Brisa, it says that Shemitah grabs hold to its money. Shenemar as the apostle says, Ki yovel hi kadosh, tia lachem should be for you. Ma kodesh tov says dama va'aser. Just like when you buy something with kedusha, the sanctity goes onto the money and it becomes forbidden. Av shvi tov says dama va'asura. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Ma kodesh tov says dama v'yoytel lechulin. What happens when you transfer something? The original item is chulin. Av shvi tov says dama v'yoytel lechulin. Talmud Loimar says the Torah tiyeh. A special din when it comes to Shemitah, that the sanctity remains on the original item. Concise says the Gemara, how does this work? Explains the Gemara. Also, you buy meat, both the meat and that which you bought have to both be destroyed. They both retain the sanctity. It does not leave the original item. Like a bas v'dagim, yasabas v'dagim, v'nechlesu dagim, lakach v'dagim yayin, yatsu dagim, v'nechlas yayin, lakach v'yayin shemen, yatsu yayin, v'nechlas shemen. If you keep on buying other items onto it, what's going to happen at the end of the day? Says the Brisa, what happens? Also, it retains the original sanctity. The original item is Shemitah produce, and everything else is where it transfers. That is how the transfer works. The Raya Tani Kavasei Dul Rav Yochanan. Now the Gemara explains. Excuse me, Tani Kavasei to Rav Elazar. The Gemara explains the Raya. Midiktani Lokach. What is this whole Brisa discussing the transferring of the kedusha of Shemitah? They kept saying Lokach, Lokach, Lokach. You buy it. Why? Midiktani Lokach. The only way to transfer the sanctity of Shemitah produce is via purchase, says the Gemara. From the fact that the Brisa says Lokach, a beautiful raya. So the opinion of Rav Elazar, Tani Kavas Rav Yochanan, we have right to opinion of Rav Yochanan, Echad Shvius, Echad Meiser, Sheni Meschalen Al Behema Chayav Oiv. You could be Mechalel, you could deconsecrate the Shvius or Meiser Sheni onto an animal, Oiv. chicken or chaya, bein chayim bein shchutim, either alive or dead, divrei meir v'chama imrim. Al shchutim mischalin, al chaylin in mischalin. Only on someone was shechted. Why? Because the Eruks were afraid, Shem yigdal me'em adarim, maybe you will raise with them flocks. So what do we see over here? And this brisa says nothing about lokach. What does the brisa say about transferring the sanctity of Shemitah? It says cholal. That's all right, Rav Yochanan, that the way to transfer the sanctity of the Shemitah is not necessarily only via purchase, but even via just being halal, being deconsecrating it. And that is the machlekes Rav Yochanan, Rav Elazar. Rav Elazar is saying the only way to get the kedusha of Shemitah to move onward is by purchase. Rav Yochanan is saying even by halal. All right, Rav Yochanan, right, Rav Elazar. And we'll pick it up from the very bottom of this Amud tomorrow.